Hi, everybody. I think I'm live here on on Nashville Savvy. So welcome. I was just looking over some of my notes. Today we're going to be covering, obviously it's election day, a very rainy election day here in Nashville. And we're going to be covering all things Metro Council that happened this Tuesday. We're going to be looking a bit into the election, and then we're going to do a few things a little local corner of things that I like, and Metro Mayhem for things that are just a little bit crazy here in Nashville. So thanks for joining me. Obviously, first we're going to start off with the election day information. So we're jumping into election day today. This is going to be a big day. We've obviously had a surge since last week. The last 3 days of voting and early voting, really everybody came out. Almost 40% of all the votes cast in early voting were cast in the last 3 days of election, which is wild, but also not too surprising because people were extremely undecided given so many people who are running in this race and still trying to feel out who exactly it is that they want in office. And I still think people are trying to figure that out. I've talked to people all week who are planning to go to the polls today, who are still trying to figure out what direction they want this city to go in. So we're going to pull up a poll that actually was that Davis showed yesterday, but I wanted to show it again because this is extremely significant. It came out last week, and it obviously shows Freddie O'Connell still in the lead. He's been pulling a lead since the beginning, except for maybe in the very beginning when there was more name recognition between Heidi Campbell and Jeff Yarbrough. But now he's really pulled ahead. But if you look down below him, Alice Rowley has come out surging in the final weeks and the last week leading up to election, and of course into election day, which is I don't know if it's surprising or if people just they have been kind of sleeping on her a little bit, but she was right up there at this poll for 18.8%, so that's almost 19%, which that would put her before Matt Wiltshire. And of course, we know that looking at Matt and his race, it's been a known thing that his campaign has been a little bit worried about Alice, and it looks like he was right to worry about Alice. So today's really going to determine with half of the votes. The rest of the votes are going to be voted today. And so this is really going to be an exciting evening here in Nashville, figuring out who's going to make it into the runoffs. And if you want to look into how runoffs work in Nashville, please refer back to episode 1, where I really run down how runoffs work and what the positions are that are being run for in Metro. And it's a really good primer if you are just trying to get a feel, because it's kind of complicated, especially the at-large races where you're picking 5 people and splitting that vote 5 ways. So take a look at our episode 1 of Nashville Savvy if you want to understand any more of that. When we're looking at going into the next round of this, we're really going to see some different strategies. And of course, we still have another month where we're going to be inundated again with campaigns with the runoff races. So it's kind of over, but it's not over. So we'll be talking more about this, but I'll try not to bore you guys too much with the details. I like to touch on some of the more hilarious things that happen during the races more than anything else. I have allergies, guys. So if you see my eyes watering, it's not because I'm crying. Maybe I'm crying for joy that we're on election day and this is kind of almost over. Now, moving on to Metro City Council, which is on Tuesday. It was on Tuesday night. It was a packed house. We've had quite a few long Metro Council meetings throughout the tenure of these council members. So we're talking 6-hour, 8-hour meetings going until 1 a.m. in the morning. And this Tuesday wasn't any different. We were there and we saw a lot of stuff being discussed and pushed through. And I wanted to first discuss a rule change that kind of led to some interesting things on the floor, because this rule change was actually implemented by a new law passed, again, by the state. And we've seen this battle going on and on with all these laws that the state passed that now affect Metro City Council. This particular law is interesting because it just makes it so every single public meeting, there is a required public comment period on any legislation that they're discussing. So it was limited beforehand, and that it was limited to, they had to vote to hold a public hearing, and on the second reading during the what is like the first meeting of the month, because there's 2 council meetings per month, they would allow people to speak on that very specific particular ordinance, or I guess resolution too. Well, I don't know if we could speak on resolutions. I'm gonna have to look into that, but you could speak on it. It was unlimited. Anybody could come and speak, and they would hear everybody out. But it was limited in the fact that you could only come and speak on it during the second reading, and that was all she wrote. And now every single meeting, you can speak on any legislation that they are proposing. Now, it is limited. Metro Council limited it to 20 minutes for council meetings, 2 minutes per person. So that's only 10 people who can speak in the public comment period. That doesn't limit when there are actual hearings. If there's a hearing on a bill, they still do the same thing that they did before, where they let everybody speak their piece if they want to during that public hearing. But in addition, there is 20 minutes for a public comment period on any of the pieces of legislation that are put forward. And in committee meetings, which are the little groups that branch off and look into different bills and different resolutions and give their opinions, they break off into groups of specialized groups. Those are the committees that look these bills over after they're introduced. During those committee meetings, there is, I think it's 8 minutes. So 4 people are allowed to speak during those meetings. Well, a rule change was proposed, but ultimately got deferred. The rule change would eliminate the pre-sign up, where you would have to sign up by the Thursday before the meeting so that you could speak in the public comment period, to first come, first serve. And some of the arguments on the floor were like, wouldn't that limit, if you're not an able-bodied person, like who can run up to the mic first? And so they're still working out the kinks. And that was an interesting conversation, to say the least. While a little bit of passive aggression. If you ever watch council meetings, you see this happen sometimes. That was an interesting conversation on the floor. Some of the other big things that came up but quickly died. I mean, this Metro Council meeting was all about deferrals and withdrawals. We had the LPR, the license plate reader pilot, is now being considered to be adopted permanently. Now, license plate readers, they are the things that scan, they're either fixed or they're mobile. So they're either in a spot, like at a light or an intersection somewhere, or they're like attached to some type of mobile, I think it's like a trailer. You see them sometimes on the bridge over here right before you get to Bridgestone, or Nissan Stadium. Wow. Nissan Stadium. And wait, now I'm confused. Is it now Bridgestone or is it Nissan? Somebody comment in the comments below. But I've been here too long, guys. I've been living in Nashville. It's the stadium's changed, everything's changed. But and they also have these LPR scanners with police officers in their cars. And what they do is they scan license plates and they give hits. A hit would mean if there's a tag out there that flags, oh, this is a stolen vehicle, somebody is out for a warrant with this tag, whatever it is, it'll flag this mechanism, this LPR that they've placed or they have on their cars. And then police can pursue these vehicles. And if you look at the data of how the pilot program went, which was by the way, this is a very contentious topic, because we start getting into scanning. It created a lot of interesting bedfellows, because of course, advocates for immigrants, they didn't want this. They didn't want ICE involved with tracking people down because they get their license plate scanned. And also libertarians, they don't want any of their information collected by the government. So we saw a lot of interesting bedfellows against the LPR pilot program. Now we have some data. It's been going on for, I think it was since March until July. And now we have some data, and looking at it, we have millions of scans. And I think it was almost 5,000 hits. And in those hits, they also included examples of what happened once they got a hit, on one of these license plates. And a lot of the situations where they were stolen vehicles, they had apprehended people who have a warrant for their arrest. They apprehended illegal firearms, stolen items, and drugs and stuff like that. So in the view of MNPD, very successful. Okay, so now we have about 14 council members who are sponsors on the bill to make the LPRs permanent. Now, this, of course, was deferred. So we don't know yet. It's a resolution, and all it takes is one vote. As of right now, it's deferred. It might be deferred all the way until we get into the new council. We'll see what happens. But for now, it's put on pause. So right now, you could still get your 2 cents into your council member of how you feel about the LPRs in Nashville. I think there's an interesting conversation about this because I've spoken extensively with people with different views on LPRs. And I think the problem seems to be, for one, because they're stationary. It's interesting to it's uncomfortable for people that there's like a stationary thing scanning cars all the time, scanning your car every single day. What are they going to do with that information? Are they going to keep that information? I do believe there is a time limit on how long they can keep that information, but who audits that? These are the types of questions that always come up when it comes to policing and these types of issues. And I think the consensus of most of the people I talk to is they're quite all right with the scanners being with a police officer in their car. They have more issue with the LPR scanners just being in a stationary position all the time. Of course, the neighborhoods where a lot of these scans that got hits boomed from like this, because it deters criminal behavior in the areas where the LPR scanner is. So it's up in the air right now. We're going to find out in the coming months as to whether this is going to just sneak through. I wouldn't be surprised. Sometimes things get deferred, people forget about it, but this is coming up and it hasn't been voted on. Another thing that we talked about was, of course, the Bristol deal. Bristol, the Motor Speedway, the fairgrounds, all of this hubbubaloo that we've been hearing about, especially post Titans stadium deal. I mean, people are pretty exhausted with their taxpayer dollars funding these types of deals. But at the same time, the speedway and the race enthusiasts, they feel like they're getting the short end of the stick because they're in the wake of the Titans stadium deal. And this has become, pretty contentious conversation. There's some battles going on, money battles, and the influence in Nashville runs deep. If you know, there's a lot of political history and people with deep pockets who want to figure out how they want this city to look and how they want this city to run. And so that adds a different layer to the discussion about Bristol. But as it was the bill that was going to push this forward was withdrawn, but it was withdrawn by the bill sponsor, Zach Young. And I want to read, what he said during council meeting, because I couldn't help but be tickled by his response. He literally, after he withdrew his bill, he told everybody in the council, oh my goodness, where are we? He told them, God willing, I'll be back and we're going to get this done. And that's all she wrote. So if he gets reelected, he plans to bring it back and bring the discussion back on the table, which I'm sure is good news for supporters of people who are interested in NASCAR. We saw some NASCAR drivers. If you guys saw my funny little cartoon thing in the beginning of this, it was Zach Young blocking the lava from overtaking NASCAR. And this leads us into other discussions of like, what kinds of things does new Nashville want to invite into its, into the, I guess, like the new vibe of Nashville. What kind of Nashville are we going to create? And I think that this discussion leans a lot into it, this discussion about the speedway and the fairgrounds. So the last thing that I wanted to, the next thing I wanted to touch on was I want to go into local corner. And we actually have a really great clip, and I want to mark this moment before we play it. This is a rare occasion where Bob Mendez sided with the state on that rule change. I want you to listen to what he said.
I think the next council should figure it out. My personal opinion is if we as an elected body don't want to listen to the public, and now that we've got clear guidance that we have to have public comment at every meeting, if we don't want to listen to the public, like, what are we doing?
So if we're not listening to the public, what are we doing? So essentially, he's agreeing with the state's rule that there should be a public comment period every single meeting. And if you have followed along with Metro City Council, you know that it is like we might as well go play the lottery because we have somebody on the council agreeing with the state. Of course, Bob Mendez is on his way out. He has served his time. He's an at-large member. He is timed out. And so he will not be back, but I am certain that we will still see him involved. He's a savvy lawyer who has been deeply involved in all of the to-do with Nashville as it's grown over the last 8-10 years. So I'm sure we won't be seeing the last of him. At one point, he was looking into running for mayor, and I think he kind of tipped his hat to Freddie O'Connell, because Freddie O'Connell also was going to be running. So we'll see if he becomes involved with any administrations in the future. But interesting that Mendez himself was willing to actually agree with the state here, but I'm sure he won't. I'm sure if we put him on the spot, he wouldn't care to admit to it in quite that context, but he did essentially agree with the state here. So the other thing that I wanted to touch on, we're gonna look into some problematic nonprofit drama. So we had a lot of money. It was I believe it was over it was at least $3 million that was going towards violence prevention programs, which you've heard about, these violence interruption programs and stuff that nonprofits are partnering with municipalities such as the Metro City government does, where they will go out into the community. And usually this is based on a prevention that focuses on mental health. You're reaching out into the community. You're giving young children and teens opportunities to grow as people and to hopefully divert them away from a violent future or a criminal future, if that makes any sense. But this is going to be our Metro Mayhem for the day. So we had a resolution come up that has been deferred a couple times, and it's designed to allocate and grant $750,000 to Why We Can't Wait, Inc. Now, this is like a program for kids that is actually really well received in Nashville, but notably absent from this resolution was Gideon's Army. Now, Gideon's Army is another local nonprofit who does participates in these violent interruption initiatives. And they have been part of this pilot program and have gotten money in the past. And interestingly, they were not included on this resolution, even though the committee recommended them. And during the actual Metro City Council meeting, I want to point out what Councilmember Allen said. She kind of explained why. She said, we do want to support violence interruption. And I know that this is just about making sure the right organizations are getting the money. Well, then Councilmember Gamble tuned in, and she was asking, why were essentially Gideon's Army, why were they left off of this resolution? And I want to show a video of, it seems like a silly question. I'm going to show you a video of maybe perhaps why they were left off of this resolution.
Leaders, we discovered a side of the group that most of the public has never seen. True had been front and center when Gideon's Army accepted a $100,000 check from the gun control group Moms Demand Action. But listen to his ideas for dealing with issues like mass incarceration.
Y'all want to know how to overturn the prisons? Say the system. Y'all know how many of us it is? Y'all know anything about prison riots? Huh? They ain't got enough people to kill all of us. They ain't got enough people to kill all of us.
Are those kind of comments in keeping with your mission?
The police also call themselves Nashville's guardians.
Gideon's Army claims it deserves another $1 million of your money because it was able to eliminate violent crime in a Nashville neighborhood that's so notorious it got its own song. But our investigation discovered, despite the group's best intentions, those claims are just not true. This scene from the neighborhood back in August reveals another side of Gideon's Army's efforts. Residents decided to make it difficult for police who came there to arrest a convicted killer wanted for violation of his federal probation. That man, Charles Brooks, was a paid employee of Gideon's Army. Court and police records reveal he was also one of the people involved in this shootout in the neighborhood back in April.
The focus is on what people see as being the failures of Gideon's Army.
Those efforts have brought them national attention along with taxpayer money and public donations.
We had no shootings, no homicides, no robberies, no carjackings, nothing for almost a year, 10 months. And that's been unheard of.
Among those shootings was that gun battle back in April, but Fatuga says the shootout allegedly involving her own employee doesn't count.
There's a difference between shootings and contact shootings.
They sound like they emptied out a 15-round clip. It's ridiculous.
Nor did it count this gun battle in July 2020 between two rival gangs, again apparently because no one was actually shot.
Surveillance video shows the founder and CEO of the nonviolence group Gideon's Army storming into the back office of a North Nashville high school in what school officials described as a profanity-laced tirade.
Now, this was a deep dive that was done by Phil Williams, who really uncovered some of the darker sides of this organization. So I'm not really sure why Council Member Gamble would question why Gideon's Army was left off, but I'm sure we're going to hear more about it. In fact, I know we will. They deferred this resolution. And in addition to these discussions that are happening on the floor, there was a substitute put in by Councilmember Toombs that would add back Gideon's Army, who would also receive the $750,000 towards, whatever programs that they want to put out back into the community. So we're bound to see much more drama. A couple things before we wrap up. We have one of the things that actually did pass through Metro City Council was the the very, I don't know if I would call it contentious, but definitely has had a lot of discussions. BPAC, the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Commission, that was a basically like a little pet project for Freddie O'Connell, who is, of course, also running for mayor, but is a council member right now. And it was finally passed through. There was some drama between some of these different organizations, such as Greenways for Nashville and Walk Bike Nashville. They wanted to be involved on this committee, and Freddie was like, no, especially because apparently there's been some beef between Greenways for Nashville and there's nonprofit biker beefs apparently going on behind the scenes when it comes to these types of initiatives. But this bill did pass, and now we technically have a bicycle and pedestrian advisory commission. So right on, y'all. Lastly, we're going to touch on something that I actually brought up today, and it kind of stole the show at the beginning of Metro City Council this week. It was the public comment hearing period. And during the public comment period, there was a particular bill that was brought up. It is BL 2106, which is a new ordinance that would, for the public safety of people downtown, would limit the decibels of how loud the music can play downtown in Nashville. And of course, this got a lot of pushback over Ginny Welsh informed everybody at the council meeting that 300 people showed up for the public comment period. Now, they only allow 10 of those people to speak, but they all signed up to talk about this bill. Why? Because reducing the decibels to 85 is basically impossible. This is what, at least this is what the people who make their living down on Broadway have made clear. And I'm going to give you a little bit of perspective from some of the people who came and spoke who live and work as musicians downtown in Nashville. Isaac McNanny, who's a local musician, he explained, nightclubs seem to be exempt from this, and they run about 100 to 120 decibels. A whisper is 30 decibels. A normal conversation is approximately 60 to 65 decibels. Most Broadway venues average about 80 decibels without music. And the streets of Broadway average about 85 to 90 decibels. So they're obviously concerned that they're not going to be able to play music loud enough for anyone to hear. And I'm going to close this out with another quote from somebody who spoke up during this public comment period, a little bit of history that has to do with how much this city and this state has booned from the tourism downtown. This comes from a very well-known local legend, John Taylor. He's known as Uncle John. He's the entertainment director at Tootsie's. And he said, music was dying down here. Music was going to Branson, Missouri. Steve Smith saved Tootsie's and had it erected as a historical landmark. If he hadn't, they would have torn down all the bars on Broadway then. This is the same feeling we're getting. Why do you want to close the music that brought millions and millions and millions of revenue into the city? And this is a sentiment that is felt not only in this situation, but by a lot of people who live and work and own businesses downtown in this music mecca that is Music City. And they're wondering, why do they want to turn down the sound? Why do they want to cut the cord on what has essentially made this city into an icon and has pulled this city out of debt? We're still in debt, you guys, but it certainly is not going to help if they start to play around with some of the logistics of how Broadway runs. And that's the point that these people, these members of the music community who make their living downtown came to the council meeting to make. And it also speaks of a larger issue that we're facing during this mayoral campaign. I know that Davis has touched on it a couple times, but who is the new Nashville? Who do these politicians want Nashville to be for? And we've seen that the likes of Steve Smith, who has been, who has put out and pushed back against Freddie O'Connell, who has also, I guess he tweeted out his retribution saying that, if Sam Smith closed all of the places that he owns, the city would be safer, Broadway would be less obnoxious, and the beer would be cheaper. That's something that Freddie O'Connell tweeted about somebody like Steve Smith, who has been a staple in growing and keeping the music alive in downtown Nashville. So it doesn't seem like they're afraid to pull any punches and cut the cord with how these people make a living down there. This is far from over. That bill did not end up coming up for a vote this Metro Council meeting. It's still on readings and it's getting referred to different committees, but I'm sure we're going to be hearing more about it. I know that one of the sponsors on the bill, besides Freddie O'Connell, that is the main sponsor, Council Member Syracuse. I know that he's stepped outside. He's had community meetings. He's been hearing these musicians and these stakeholders. He's been hearing them out. And I think that we're going to end up seeing an adjustment here. As it is right now, they would be limited with where their speakers could be placed. They'd be limited with how loud the music can be during business hours. And essentially, they would be cited if they were in violation, not only by the Metro Police, but they were also going to allow the venues to be cited and basically surveillance under, let's look at who it is, Nashville Department of Transportation, NDOT, which we do know now has a hub that is going to be going downtown thanks to Garth Brooks. And then, of course, codes. So they could be cited by, everybody is now out there to be the sound police in downtown Nashville. One last thing that they also brought up during this discussion was there are things that are exempt from this. things like the Grand Prix, things like the CMA Fest. And so these live music venues downtown feel extremely targeted. And that was the vibe that we were getting during the actual council meeting when they did the public comment period. So I'm sure that we're going to see more of that. As for the rest of this podcast, we're going to wrap it up. I just want to wish you guys a happy election day. I'm excited to see what happens once the polls close at 7 p.m. tonight. If you haven't gotten out there, I know it's raining, but you should definitely go and exercise your right to vote because your voice matters. And thanks for tuning in. If you need any other help from for guides and stuff like that before you hit the booths, we do have a voter guide on the pamphleteer.co. And of course, I do have that episode 1 that explains how things work here in Nashville runoffs. So good luck today. Have fun. Election day is exciting. And we're halfway through, guys. So thanks for joining me.